Little girl shocks millionaire CEO with 5-year business plan, his discovery left him paralyzed. Have you ever met someone who shouldn't exist? Someone whose very presence makes you question everything you thought you knew about reality itself? Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. Maxwell Thorne stood behind the floor-to-ceiling windows of his 53rd floor office, watching November rain hammer against the glass. Each droplet might as well have been another dollar in his empire, calculated, measured, profitable. At 47, Maxwell had crushed competitors like ants and fired employees like discarding yesterday's newspaper. His steel-blue eyes surveyed the cityscape below. Every building represented money. Every street corner held potential. Every soul rushing through those rain-soaked streets was just another number in his quarterly projections. "Sir, your car is waiting," his assistant announced through the intercom. Her voice carefully controlled to avoid suggesting Maxwell's time belonged to anyone but himself. The Patek Philippe on his wrist, $60,000 of Swiss precision, ticked towards 6:47 p.m. Another day of corporate conquest complete. Another step closer to the technological monopoly he'd been building for 2 decades. But here's what Maxwell didn't know. His entire world was about to shatter in the most impossible way imaginable. The elevator descended with German engineering perfection. Maxwell's reflection stared back from polished steel doors, salt and pepper hair immaculate, jawline sharp enough to cut diamonds, and that calculated half-smile that had made him millions while destroying dozens of business partnerships. He'd mastered emotional detachment so completely that his own mother once said hugging him felt like embracing a well-dressed glacier. The elevator doors opened onto the marble lobby and Maxwell's reality shifted forever. Outside the revolving glass doors sat a small figure hunched over a makeshift jewelry stand. Rain had destroyed the cardboard sign, but he could still make out handmade dreams written in what looked like crayon. The girl couldn't have been more than 8 or 9, wearing a galaxy-patterned hoodie that looked hand-designed, complete with stitched constellations that defied every law of astronomy. Maxwell's first instinct? Call security. Thorne Industries had zero tolerance for street vendors or anything that might damage the corporate image. But something paralyzed him completely. Maybe it was her absolute concentration as she worked, oblivious to rain soaking through her inadequate shelter. Maybe it was how her mismatched braids, one tight, one loose, reminded him of someone he tried desperately to forget. "Sir?" His driver Victor emerged from the black Bentley, umbrella ready. "Shall I have security handle this?" Instead of answering, Maxwell found himself walking toward the girl. His handmade Italian leather shoes clicked against wet pavement with each step, a sound that usually announced his arrival like a royal decree. The girl never looked up. Up close, Maxwell realized this wasn't some amateur craft project. Each piece of jewelry was intricate, almost impossibly detailed for someone her age. Bracelets wove together different materials, beads, wire, what appeared to be tiny computer components in patterns that seemed to shift and change as he watched. The workmanship was extraordinary, but what truly stopped his heart were her eyes. Heterochromatic eyes, one amber, one deep green, remained fixed on her work with laser-like focus that seemed beyond human. "Interesting technique," Maxwell said, his voice carrying that patronizing tone he'd perfected for dealing with subordinates' children at company events. The girl finally looked up. Maxwell felt his breath catch in his throat. Those impossible eyes seemed to look right through him, past his expensive suit and carefully constructed persona, seeing something he'd spent decades hiding from the world. "You're Maxwell Thorne," she said. Not a question. A statement delivered with the matter-of-fact certainty of someone commenting on the weather. "I am." Maxwell's left eyebrow arched involuntarily, a tell he'd never been able to eliminate despite years of high-stakes poker with international investors. "And you are?" "Ren Calloway." She set down her pliers and pushed auburn hair behind her ear. "I've been waiting for you." The calculating half-smile that had been Maxwell's default expression for decades faltered completely. "Waiting for me? Young lady, I think you have me confused with someone else." "No confusion." Ren reached into a small wooden box beside her workspace and pulled out a bracelet that seemed to shimmer with its own inner light. "This is for you." Maxwell stared. The bracelet was unlike anything in her display. Where the others were beautiful, this one was breathtaking. Tiny crystals woven between metallic threads created patterns that seemed to pulse with electrical energy. "I don't typically purchase jewelry from children selling on the street?" Her voice carried no offense, just curiosity. "That's probably wise." Most 8-year-olds don't understand the intricacies of quantum entanglement theory or the applications of neural network algorithms in predictive modeling. Maxwell stared at her in complete shock. The words themselves were startling enough coming from someone who should have been worried about homework and cartoons. But it was the way she said them, with the casual confidence of a professor discussing freshman-level concepts. Quantum entanglement, Maxwell repeated slowly. At 8 years old. 8 3/4, Ren corrected, holding up the bracelet. This contains a comprehensive analysis of Thorne Industries' current expansion strategy with particular attention to the flaws in your Q3 projections for the Southeast Asian markets. The bracelet itself is just the delivery mechanism. The real value is in the information. Maxwell felt the world tilt sideways. In 30 years of business, he'd encountered child prodigies, savants, and geniuses of every stripe. None of them had ever approached him on a rain-soaked street corner with a critique of his expansion strategy. "That's quite impossible," he said, reaching for the bracelet despite himself. "Our Q3 projections are classified. They're known only to my board of directors and senior executives." Ren's impossible, color-shifting eyes seemed to twinkle with amusement. "Nothing is truly classified when you understand the right connections. Take the bracelet, Mr. Thorne. Read what's inside. Then decide if you want to save your company or watch it collapse in the next 6 months. Have you ever received a warning that seemed impossible but felt terrifyingly real? Drop a comment below. We want to hear about your strangest encounters with the unexplainable. What would you do if you discovered that an 8-year-old dead girl knew more about your business than your own executives? Maxwell's penthouse office had been designed for one purpose: intimidation. Rare art worth millions lined the walls. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a god's-eye view of the city. The desk, carved from a single piece of Brazilian rosewood, had been positioned to catch light in a way that cast visitors into shadow. At 3:17 a.m., alone with city lights sprawling below, Maxwell discovered that power meant absolutely nothing when faced with the impossible. The bracelet lay dismantled on his desk, components spread across the rosewood surface like technological entrails. Hidden within the intricate beadwork, woven between crystals and metallic threads, had been something that defied every law of physics. A complete business analysis written in microscopic script on sheets of synthetic polymer so thin they were nearly invisible. The analysis itself was a masterpiece of strategic thinking. In just 12 pages, it dissected Thorne Industries' expansion plans with surgical precision, identifying 7 critical flaws that Maxwell's own team had missed. The Southeast Asian market projections were wrong, catastrophically so. The regulatory hurdles in Vietnam and Thailand that his executives had dismissed would cost hundreds of millions. The currency fluctuation patterns his analysts had overlooked would wipe out projected profits within the first quarter. But what truly paralyzed Maxwell wasn't the accuracy of the analysis. It was the handwriting. Delicate, careful letters with distinctive flourishes on capitals. The way the G's curled at the bottom. The slight rightward slant of the entire script. The particular way the I's were dotted with tiny circles instead of points. Maxwell had seen this handwriting before. In birthday cards and school reports. In the secret diary he'd found after the funeral. The handwriting belonged to Adriana Calloway. Adriana, who had been 23 when they'd met at a technology conference in Silicon Valley. Adriana, who had been brilliant and passionate and utterly certain that technology could save the world. Adriana, who had believed Maxwell's ruthless business practices could be tempered with compassion and social responsibility. Adriana, who had died in a car accident 12 years ago, 3 months after their relationship had ended with lawyers and non-disclosure agreements and a check for a sum that Maxwell had convinced himself would solve all problems. Adriana, who had never told him she was pregnant. Maxwell's hands shook as he reached for the phone. His private investigator, Marcus Volkov, was accustomed to unusual requests at unusual hours. In 15 years of working for Maxwell, Marcus had tracked down industrial spies, located missing heirs, and uncovered enough corporate secrets to topple governments. But he'd never heard the tremor in Maxwell's voice that came through the line at 3:23 a.m. "I need you to find everything about a girl named Ren Calloway," Maxwell said, staring at handwriting that belonged to a dead woman. Age 8 or 9, auburn hair, heterochromatic eyes. "I need her address, her guardian, her school records, everything." "How quickly do you need this information?" "Yesterday." Marcus's response came 6 hours later via encrypted email. The file was impossibly thin for a modern child's background check, containing only the most basic information. Ren Calloway, age 8, currently living with her maternal grandmother, Iris Calloway, in a small apartment in the Meridian district. Parents deceased. No school records, apparently homeschooled. No medical records beyond basic immunizations. No social media presence, no digital footprint, nothing that would indicate how an 8-year-old had acquired knowledge of quantum physics and strategic business analysis. What the file did contain made Maxwell's blood run cold. The parents listed were Adrian Calloway, a male name, not Adriana. But the photograph attached to the deceased mother's information showed a woman Maxwell recognized immediately despite the 12 years that had passed since he'd last seen her alive. Adriana Calloway, née Adriana Chin, had apparently legally changed her name after their relationship ended. She'd given birth to a daughter 9 months after their last meeting. She died in a car accident 3 years ago when Ren would have been 5. But the most disturbing detail was buried in the accident report. The car that had killed Adriana had been sideswiped by a delivery truck belonging to Thorne Industries Logistics Division. The case had been settled quietly with a payout to the victim's family that Maxwell's legal team had handled without his direct involvement. Maxwell had unknowingly killed the mother of the child he'd never known he had. And now that dead child was trying to save his company. Have you ever discovered a truth about yourself that changed everything you thought you knew? How do you process information that challenges your entire reality? Let us know in the comments. Your story might be more important than you realize. What happens when you go looking for a dead child and find evidence that death might not be as final as we think? The Meridian district existed in the shadows between Silicon Valley's gleaming towers and the forgotten neighborhoods where technology's promises hadn't yet arrived. Maxwell's Bentley looked ridiculously out of place among aging apartment buildings and corner stores, like a black diamond dropped in a sandbox. The building where Ren supposedly lived was a 3-story walk-up with paint peeling from its concrete facade and windows that hadn't been cleaned in decades. Maxwell climbed to the 2nd floor, his Italian leather shoes echoing in the narrow stairwell, and knocked on apartment 2B. The woman who answered was in her 70s, with silver hair pulled back in a practical bun and eyes that held the weariness of someone who'd seen too much disappointment. She wore a faded floral dress and a cardigan that had been mended multiple times. When she saw Maxwell in his $1,000 suit, her expression shifted from curiosity to suspicion. "Mrs. Calloway? I'm Maxwell Thorne. I believe you're caring for your granddaughter, Ren." Iris Calloway's face went pale. She gripped the doorframe with one hand, the other moving to her chest as if to steady her heart. "What do you want with my granddaughter? I met her yesterday. She's a remarkable child. I'd like to speak with her, if possible. Ren's been dead for 3 years. The words hit Maxwell like a physical blow. He stepped backward, his heel catching on the worn carpet. "Excuse me. My granddaughter died in the same accident that killed my daughter. She was in the car with Adriana when that truck," Iris's voice broke. "When that truck from your company ran them off the road." Maxwell's mouth moved, but no sound came out. The hallway seemed to tilt and shift around him, reality becoming as fluid and unreliable as quantum mechanics. "That's impossible," he finally managed. "I spoke with her yesterday. She was selling jewelry outside my building. She knew things about my company, About your company?" Iris's voice turned sharp. "The company that killed my family and then tried to buy my silence with blood money? Mrs. Calloway, I assure you, I had no knowledge of any accident involving your family. But I met Ren yesterday. She gave me this." Maxwell pulled out his phone and showed her a photograph of the dismantled bracelet. "She knew intimate details about my business operations." Iris stared at the photograph for a long moment, her expression cycling through confusion, fear, and something else, recognition. "May I come in? I think we need to talk." The apartment was small but spotlessly clean, filled with furniture that had been expensive once, decades ago, and was now held together by care and necessity. Photographs lined the mantelpiece, Adriana at various ages, graduation photos, family gatherings, and prominently displayed in the center a portrait of a young girl with auburn hair and mismatched eyes. Ren Calloway, the same face that had looked up at him from the makeshift jewelry stand. "She was gifted," Iris said, following Maxwell's gaze to the photograph. "Not just smart, gifted in ways that scared her teachers. She was reading at a college level by age 5, solving mathematical equations that graduate students struggled with. Adriana said she got it from her father, whoever he was." Maxwell's throat felt tight. "Adriana never told you who the father was?" "She said he was a businessman. Someone important who couldn't be part of Ren's life." Someone who'd paid her to disappear. Iris's eyes fixed on Maxwell with sudden understanding. You're him. You're Ren's father. It wasn't a question. Maxwell nodded slowly, the weight of 12 years of ignorance settling on his shoulders like a lead blanket. After the accident, Iris continued, strange things started happening. Adriana's old computer would turn on by itself, displaying files that hadn't been there before. Complex mathematical formulas, business plans, scientific theories. I thought it was some kind of glitch, residual data from her work. But then I found notebooks in Ren's room, notebooks filled with handwriting that looked exactly like what you showed me in that photograph. Notebooks written after she died? Notebooks that appeared after she died. Always in the same place, always containing information I couldn't understand. I threw them away, but more would appear. I changed the locks, thinking someone was breaking in. But the security cameras I installed never showed anyone entering the apartment. Maxwell felt his rational, calculating mind begin to fracture. Where are these notebooks now? Burned. I burned them all last month, hoping it would stop. Iris looked directly into his eyes. But it didn't, did it? She found you. Do you know someone whose presence seems impossible to explain? Have you ever experienced events that science can't account for? Share your story below. You might not be alone in experiencing the unexplainable. How do you explain security footage that shows the same person in multiple places at the exact same time? Maxwell's private security team was the best money could buy. Ex-CIA operatives, former military intelligence officers, and corporate espionage specialists who'd honed their skills in the shadowy spaces between nations and corporations. Within 48 hours, they'd assembled a timeline that should have been impossible. The security footage from Thorne Industries showed Ren Calloway approaching the building at 6:23 p.m. on Tuesday, setting up her jewelry stand at 6:31 p.m. and disappearing from the cameras at 7:14 p.m. Exactly 3 minutes after Maxwell had entered the building. But here's where reality began to collapse. The same cameras showed her appearing at the Meridian District Metro station at 6:45 p.m. while simultaneously remaining at her jewelry stand downtown. The Metro footage showed her boarding the Red Line train at 6:47 p.m. while downtown cameras captured her packing up her jewelry display at 6:52 p.m. Both versions of Ren moved with purpose, both interacted with their environments in ways that ruled out simple digital manipulation. The girl existed in two places at once, a violation of physical law that no amount of technology could explain. Marcus Volkov had seen his share of inexplicable things in 15 years as a private investigator, but the Ren Calloway case was pushing him into territory he'd never imagined existed. "Boss," he said, spreading photographs across Maxwell's desk, "I've got 17 separate sightings of this girl across the city in the past week. School security cameras, traffic cams, ATM surveillance, store footage. But here's the thing, she's never where she's supposed to be and she's often in multiple places simultaneously." Maxwell studied the photographs. Each showed the same girl, auburn hair, heterochromatic eyes, galaxy-patterned clothing, but something subtle was different in each image. A slight variation in posture, a different expression, tiny details that suggested these weren't the same person caught on different cameras. What about facial recognition software? That's where it gets weird. The software identifies her as the same person with 99.7% accuracy, but the biometric measurements are subtly different. Height varies by up to 3 inches, facial structure shows minor variations, even eye color seems to shift between frames. Maxwell's phone buzzed. A text message from an unknown number. "Check your email? The real analysis is just beginning. W." The email contained a single attachment, a video file labeled quantuminheritance.mp4. Maxwell opened the file on his private computer, the one isolated from Thorne Industries' network and protected by encryption that would make government agencies jealous. The video showed his office, apparently filmed from inside the room, but from an angle that should have been impossible given the furniture placement. Ren appeared on screen, sitting in Maxwell's chair, her small frame dwarfed by the executive leather. But she seemed perfectly at ease, her heterochromatic eyes focused directly on the camera as if she could see Maxwell watching her. "Hello, Dad," she said, and Maxwell's world stopped. "I know this is confusing. I know you have questions about how I can be here when Iris showed you the death certificate, when you've seen the accident reports, when every piece of evidence says I died 3 years ago with Mom in that car your company's truck pushed off the highway." Maxwell's hands trembled as he reached for his phone to call Marcus, but Ren's voice stopped him. "Don't call Marcus. He can't help you understand this. No one can, because what's happening to us exists outside the boundaries of conventional reality. I died, Dad. I died scared and confused and angry that I'd never get to meet the father Mom talked about in whispers. But death isn't the ending people think it is. It's just different. The camera angle shifted, though Ren hadn't moved. Now Maxwell could see the entire office, and there were two Rens, one in the chair, one standing by the window. Quantum mechanics teaches us that particles can exist in multiple states simultaneously until they're observed. What if consciousness works the same way? What if the boundary between life and death is just another quantum state that can be manipulated by someone who understands the right connections? The Ren by the window turned to face the camera. I've been learning, Dad. Learning from Mom's memories, from the quantum research she was doing before she met you, from the vast networks of information that exist in the spaces between spaces. I know about your company's expansion plans because I can access the quantum states of information itself. I know about the flaws in your strategy because I can see the probability matrices that govern market fluctuations. But mostly, said the Ren in the chair, I know about you because I carry your DNA, your neural patterns, your capacity for both creation and destruction. I'm your daughter, Maxwell Thorne, and I've come to save you from the same ruthless ambition that killed my mother. The video ended with both Rens looking directly at the camera, their heterochromatic eyes reflecting light that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. Maxwell sat in his office for 6 hours after watching the video, his rational mind at war with evidence that defied every law of physics he'd ever learned. When his assistant knocked at 7 a.m. to announce his first meeting of the day, Maxwell made a decision that would have seemed impossible just a week earlier. He canceled everything. For the first time in his professional life, Maxwell Thorne put business aside to chase a ghost who claimed to be his daughter and might be trying to save his soul. Have you ever received a message that challenged everything you believed about reality? How do you process evidence that science says should be impossible? Let us know your thoughts. We're curious about your experiences with the unexplainable. What would you do if your dead daughter asked to meet you at midnight in an abandoned warehouse to reveal a conspiracy that reaches into the heart of your own company? The warehouse where Ren asked to meet was in the old industrial district, a maze of abandoned factories and defunct shipping facilities that urban renewal had somehow forgotten. Maxwell arrived at midnight, as instructed, his usual security detail replaced by a single bodyguard who'd been briefed to stay in the car unless specifically summoned. The building was vast and empty, its high ceilings disappearing into shadows that seemed to move independently of any light source. Maxwell's footsteps echoed in the cavernous space as he made his way toward a soft glow emanating from the center of the warehouse floor. Ren sat at a small table working on another jewelry piece under the illumination of what appeared to be floating orbs of light. She looked exactly as she had outside his office building, 8 years old, galaxy-patterned hoodie, mismatched braids, but the air around her shimmered with an energy that made Maxwell's skin tingle. You came, she said without looking up from her work. I wasn't certain you would. I'm not certain why I did. Maxwell approached the table slowly, his eyes adjusting to the strange, sourceless lighting. This is impossible. You're impossible. Most of quantum mechanics is impossible until you understand the math. Ren set down her tools and looked up at him with those color-shifting eyes. Did you bring the documents I requested? Maxwell pulled a manila folder from his coat. Every detail about the accident. Police reports, insurance investigations, witness statements, internal memos from my company's legal department. Everything. Ren opened the folder and spread the documents across the table. As she read, the floating lights grew brighter, casting sharp shadows that seemed to move with their own volition. The driver of the truck was named David Hartwell, she said, reading from one of the reports. 34 years old, married, 2 children, clean driving record, no history of substance abuse. The accident occurred at 3:47 p.m. on a clear day with good visibility. The investigation found no evidence of mechanical failure or driver error, Maxwell said. It was ruled an unfortunate accident. But it wasn't. Ren looked up from the papers, her heterochromatic eyes now glowing with the same strange light that filled the warehouse. David Hartwell was following orders. Orders that came from someone in your company who knew Mom was getting close to exposing the quantum research project you'd been secretly funding. Maxwell felt the familiar chill that accompanied truly bad news. What quantum research project? The one Mom was hired to sabotage. Ren's voice carried a sadness that seemed too deep for an 8-year-old, dead or alive. Thorne Industries has been secretly funding quantum consciousness research for the past 15 years. Military applications, primarily the ability to project human consciousness across vast distances, to exist in multiple quantum states simultaneously, to manipulate reality at the subatomic level. That's science fiction. Is it? Ren gestured to the floating lights, to her own impossible presence. Mom was a quantum physicist before she met you. She was also a corporate spy, hired by a consortium of your competitors to infiltrate your company and steal the quantum research. But she fell in love with you instead, and when she got pregnant, she decided to disappear rather than complete her mission. Maxwell sank into the chair across from Ren, his mind reeling. Adriana was a spy? She was a lot of things. Brilliant scientist, devoted mother, conflicted human being who thought she could protect both you and me by running away. But your security team found her anyway. They discovered her original mission, realized she knew too much about the quantum project, and decided she was too dangerous to leave alive. My security team? Maxwell's voice was barely a whisper. Marcus Volkov received the order directly from you, or at least from someone using your authorization codes. The truck driver, David Hartwell, was told it was a matter of national security. He was supposed to cause a minor accident, just enough to hospitalize Mom so she could be quietly eliminated. But David was nervous, inexperienced. He hit the car too hard, sending it off the bridge. Mom and I died instantly. The floating lights began to pulse with increasing intensity, and Maxwell realized they weren't lights at all. They were manifestations of Ren's emotional state, quantum fluctuations made visible through whatever process allowed her to exist between life and death. Marcus never told me about any of this, Maxwell said, because Marcus never knew the real source of his orders. The quantum research project operates through a shadow network within your company, funded by black budget allocations and hidden in subsidiary companies you've forgotten you own. Someone with access to your personal authorization codes has been using your identity to fund research that violates every international treaty on human experimentation. Ren reached across the table and placed her small hand over Maxwell's. Her touch was cold but oddly comforting, like touching starlight. I'm not here to punish you, Dad. I'm here to warn you. The Quantum Consciousness Project is nearing completion, and when it goes online, the people running it won't need your money or your authorization codes anymore. They'll eliminate you the same way they eliminated Mom and me, and they'll use your company's resources to fundamentally alter the nature of human consciousness itself. Have you ever discovered that someone you trusted completely was working against you? How do you rebuild your reality when everything you believed turns out to be built on lies? Share your experiences below. Understanding betrayal might be the key to preventing it. Maxwell's hands trembled as he scrolled through financial records that painted a portrait of betrayal so complete it was almost artistic. At 3:47 a.m., surrounded by printouts and glowing screens in his executive office, he discovered that his empire had been built on lies more sophisticated than any corporate espionage thriller. Quantum Mirror. The project name appeared in dozens of subsidiary accounts, buried beneath layers of shell companies and offshore holdings. 15 years of unauthorized research, funded through his authorization codes but executed by people who saw him as nothing more than a convenient signature. Have you ever discovered that your entire personality was a lie? The door to his office opened without a knock. Marcus Volkov entered, no longer the composed investigator Maxwell had trusted for over a decade. His usually perfect appearance was disheveled, his eyes carrying the wild intensity of someone who'd spent too long staring into abysses that stared back. You found it, Marcus said, settling into the chair across from Maxwell's desk with the casual confidence of someone who owned the room. I wondered when you'd dig deep enough to see the real structure. You've been manipulating my company for 15 years. Maxwell's voice was steady, but his right hand betrayed him with that involuntary twitch that appeared whenever he encountered genuine surprises. Not manipulating. Guiding. There's a difference. Marcus pulled out a tablet and slid it across the rosewood surface. Dr. Nathaniel Cross sends his regards. He's eager to meet the man whose resources made their breakthrough possible. The tablet displayed research files that made Maxwell's blood freeze. Human test subjects connected to machinery that looked like medieval torture devices crossed with computer terminals. Neural activity charts showing consciousness patterns that defied every scientific understanding of how minds functioned. Financial projections for consciousness commoditization that treated human awareness like crude oil waiting to be refined. This is what you've been funding, Marcus continued, his voice carrying the detached precision of someone discussing quarterly earnings rather than human experimentation. The ability to project consciousness across multiple quantum states simultaneously. Military applications are obvious, but the civilian potential is extraordinary. Maxwell studied the files, his enhanced pattern recognition identifying something that made his stomach clench. These test subjects. Some of them are Thorne Industries employees. Volunteers. All volunteers? Marcus's smile held no warmth. We offered bonuses for participation in advanced cognitive research. People will agree to almost anything if you phrase it correctly and provide adequate compensation. You turned my employees into lab rats. We evolved them beyond the limitations of single-state consciousness. They can now manipulate stock markets, influence political decisions, even alter probability matrices that govern random events. They've transcended baseline human existence. Do you know someone whose behavior changed overnight, becoming almost robotic in their efficiency? Maxwell's secure phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Check the Dow Jones futures. Your volunteers are having fun. W. He pulled up the financial markets on his computer. The futures were moving in patterns that violated every principle of market behavior he'd learned in 30 years of business. Stocks rising and falling in perfect synchronization, currency fluctuations following mathematical sequences that suggested artificial manipulation. Commodity prices shifting in ways that could only result from coordinated intervention by entities with access to information that didn't exist yet. They're using consciousness projection to manipulate global markets, Maxwell whispered. They're demonstrating the commercial applications of quantum consciousness technology. Every transaction, every investment decision, every economic indicator can be influenced by someone who exists in multiple quantum states simultaneously. Marcus leaned forward, his eyes gleaming with the fervor of a true believer. We're not just changing individual minds, Maxwell. We're reshaping the fundamental structure of human civilization. The office lights flickered. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Maxwell could see street lights throughout the financial district pulsing in synchronized patterns. Whatever the test subjects were doing, it was affecting the electrical infrastructure of the entire city. This has to stop, Maxwell said, reaching for his phone to call emergency services. Marcus's hand shot out, gripping Maxwell's wrist with strength that seemed enhanced beyond normal human capacity. It's far too late to stop anything. The technology exists. The knowledge exists. The only question now is whether you continue to benefit from humanity's evolution or become an obstacle that needs to be eliminated. The threat hung in the air between them like a physical presence. Maxwell realized that the man he trusted with his most sensitive business matters had become something else entirely, something that saw human consciousness as a resource to be harvested rather than a sacred aspect of existence that deserved protection. His phone buzzed again. Building 47, Warehouse District. Come alone. The real conversation starts now. Building 47 squatted in the warehouse district like a concrete monument to forgotten industry. Maxwell arrived at the coordinates Marcus had provided, his usual security detail replaced by a single bodyguard who'd been instructed to remain with the vehicle unless specifically summoned. The November wind carried the scent of rust and abandonment through the empty streets. Inside, the warehouse was a cathedral of shadows and artificial light. Marcus waited in the center of the vast space, but he wasn't alone. Dr. Nathaniel Cross stood beside him. A thin man in his 50s whose pale complexion suggested years spent in underground laboratories. Two other figures flanked them, their military bearing unmistakable despite civilian clothing. Maxwell Thorne, Dr. Cross said, his voice carrying the clinical detachment of someone who viewed human beings as experimental data. The unwitting architect of the greatest breakthrough in human consciousness research. Unwitting is the operative word. Maxwell stepped forward, his expensive shoes echoing in the emptiness. 15 years of unauthorized research, funded through my company without my knowledge or consent. Knowledge and consent are luxuries we couldn't afford, Cross replied. The military applications alone justified any deception. Soldiers who can exist in multiple locations simultaneously, intelligence operatives who can gather information while remaining physically secure, commanders who can direct battles from within the conflict itself while their bodies remain safe. Have you ever felt like a puppet whose strings were controlled by someone you trusted? But the military applications were just the beginning, Marcus added, his professional demeanor completely abandoned. We discovered that consciousness projection could manipulate financial systems in ways that make traditional market manipulation look primitive. Stock prices, currency fluctuations, commodity markets, all can be controlled by entities who exist in quantum superposition. Maxwell felt reality shifting around him like quicksand. You've been using my employees as test subjects for consciousness manipulation experiments. We've been offering them evolutionary opportunities, cross-corrected. The volunteers you're so concerned about now possess capabilities that baseline humans can only dream of. They can influence events across vast distances, access information that doesn't technically exist yet, manipulate probability itself. Show him, Marcus commanded. Cross gestured to equipment Maxwell hadn't noticed in the shadows. Screens flickered to life, displaying waveforms and readouts that looked like the heartbeat of reality itself. In the center of the array was a chair that bristled with electrodes and field generators resembling a fusion of electric chair and science fiction transport device. Quantum consciousness projection cross-explained with the enthusiasm of someone discussing a favorite hobby. We upload human awareness into superposition states, allowing unlimited manipulation of physical reality. Political systems, economic markets, military operations, all controllable by consciousness that exists beyond the constraints of single-state existence. And you've been testing this technology for how long? 3 years. Ever since we eliminated the security risk posed by Adriana Chin and her daughter. Cross's expression remained clinically neutral, as if discussing laboratory animals rather than murder victims. Their deaths provided excellent quantum residue for our consciousness projection experiments. The temperature in the warehouse dropped noticeably. In the shadows beyond the equipment array, shapes began to move, not quite human, not quite something else, existing in spaces between definition and reality. You've been using their murders to power your experiments, Maxwell said, rage building in his voice. Consciousness doesn't simply vanish at death, Cross continued, oblivious to the supernatural tension building around them. It transitions into quantum superposition states that can be harvested and manipulated. Adriana and Ren's awareness has been integral to our research breakthroughs. Do you believe that death is truly the end, or could consciousness survive in forms we don't understand? The shadows began to coalesce, and Maxwell recognized familiar figures emerging from the darkness. Adriana appeared first, looking exactly as she had 12 years ago, but carrying knowledge that belonged to someone who'd experienced death and learned to exist beyond it. Beside her, Ren materialized, no longer the 8-year-old Maxwell had met, but something older, wiser, carrying accumulated understanding from 3 years spent existing between life and death. That's enough, Adriana's voice echoed through the warehouse with harmonics that seemed to come from multiple dimensions simultaneously. You've experimented with forces beyond your understanding, and now you'll face the consequences of treating consciousness like a commodity. Marcus reached for his weapon, but the gun began dissolving in his hand, its molecular structure coming apart at the quantum level. Electronic equipment started malfunctioning, sparks flying from circuits that couldn't handle the intersection of consciousness and quantum mechanics. Impossible, Cross whispered, backing away from the advancing figures. Dead consciousness can't maintain coherence for this duration. Quantum decoherence should have eliminated any residual awareness patterns. Should have eliminated what? Ren's voice joined her mother's, carrying authority that seemed impossible from someone who should have been worried about homework and cartoons. Should have prevented us from learning to manipulate the same forces you've been studying? Should have stopped us from understanding that consciousness isn't produced by quantum mechanics, it controls them? The warehouse began shifting around them, walls becoming transparent, revealing networks of quantum research facilities that existed in spaces between conventional reality. Maxwell could see laboratories where human subjects were connected to consciousness projection equipment. Their minds fragmented across multiple quantum states while their bodies withered in sterile medical environments. This stops now, Maxwell declared, his voice cutting through the supernatural chaos. All of it. The research, the experiments, the violation of human consciousness itself. You can't stop evolution, Marcus snarled, his professional composure completely shattered. We've transcended single-state consciousness. We exist in quantum superposition. We're gods compared to baseline humanity. No, Ren said, her child's voice carrying the authority of someone who'd spent 3 years learning the deepest secrets of existence. You're parasites who learned to manipulate consciousness without understanding it. You see awareness as a tool to exploit rather than the fundamental force that connects all existence. The quantum field generators began overloading, their containment systems failing as combined consciousness disrupted delicate experimental balances. Reality itself seemed to reject artificial manipulation of quantum states, and Maxwell realized he was witnessing something unprecedented, the rebellion of consciousness against those who sought to control it. The warehouse dissolved like a digital mirage, revealing the true scope of the quantum mirror project. Maxwell found himself standing in a vast underground complex that defied architectural possibility, its corridors stretching in directions that violated basic geometry. Through transparent walls, he could see dozens of human subjects connected to consciousness projection equipment, their bodies maintained by life support while their minds existed in quantum superposition states. "This is what your money built, Dad," Ren said, her small hands slipping into Maxwell's as they walked through corridors that existed partially in conventional reality and partially in quantum space. 15 years of research into consciousness manipulation, funded through your company but directed by people who saw human beings as experimental subjects rather than individuals deserving dignity. Each laboratory they passed revealed new horrors. Subjects whose consciousness had been split across multiple quantum states, leaving their bodies catatonic while their minds experienced reality from dozens of perspectives simultaneously. Researchers who had volunteered for consciousness projection experiments and become trapped in quantum superposition, existing as ghostly figures who could manipulate reality but never again experience unified existence. Have you ever wondered what would happen if your mind could be in multiple places at once? The military applications were just the beginning, Marcus said, his voice now carrying the detached quality of someone whose consciousness had been fundamentally altered by quantum manipulation. We discovered that consciousness projection could manipulate stock markets, influence political decisions, even alter probability matrices governing random events. We became gods, Maxwell. We transcended baseline human limitations. And lost your humanity in the process, Adriana said, her quantum-enhanced awareness revealing the full scope of the conspiracy. The truck driver who killed us, David Hartwell, he didn't just follow orders. His consciousness was projected into quantum superposition, his free will overridden by someone existing in multiple quantum states simultaneously. He experienced the accident from both perspectives as driver and victim, which explains his suicide 3 days later. Maxwell felt his rational worldview crumble completely. Someone used quantum consciousness manipulation to force him to kill you? Someone who needed to eliminate the security threat we represented, Ren confirmed, her form shifting to reveal glimpses of the woman she might have become. But they made a critical error. They assumed consciousness destroyed through quantum manipulation would simply dissipate. They didn't understand that awareness fragmented at quantum levels doesn't disappear, it evolves. The corridor expanded, revealing a chamber where hundreds of consciousness projection chairs were arranged in concentric circles. Most were occupied by figures that flickered between human and something else entirely, test subjects whose awareness had been so thoroughly manipulated they existed in permanent quantum superposition. "This is the final phase," Dr. Cross announced, his voice coming from multiple directions as his own consciousness began fragmenting under quantum field disruption. Mass consciousness projection. The ability to override human free will on planetary scales, reshaping reality according to our vision of what humanity should become. A vision treating consciousness as commodity to be harvested, Adriana said, her anger causing quantum fields to fluctuate wildly. A vision seeing human beings as raw material for consciousness manipulation experiments. Do you realize how much of your daily life is already influenced by technologies you don't understand? Maxwell realized with growing horror that he was looking at the future Marcus and Cross had planned, not just for laboratory subjects, but for all humanity. The quantum consciousness projection technology was designed to be scalable, deployable through communication networks and technological infrastructure forming the backbone of modern civilization. Your smartphone, computer, smart television. All emit quantum fields that can be manipulated to affect human consciousness, Marcus explained, his form flickering between solid and translucent. We've been testing the technology for months, subtly influencing market behavior, political opinions, even personal relationships. Quantum mirror isn't just about consciousness projection, it's about consciousness control on species-wide scales. Maxwell staggered backward, the full implications hitting him like physical blows. Every device he'd used, every digital interaction, every decision over recent months, all potentially influenced by quantum fields designed to override human free will. How long have you been manipulating my consciousness specifically? Maxwell asked. Since the day you hired me 15 years ago, Marcus replied, his quantum-fragmented consciousness now spread across multiple visible forms. Your ruthless business practices, emotional detachment, willingness to sacrifice human relationships for profit. Those weren't entirely natural personality traits. They were enhanced through subtle quantum consciousness manipulation designed to make you the perfect funding source. The warehouse laboratory began shifting as Ren and Adriana's combined consciousness asserted greater control over local reality. Walls became transparent, revealing the true scope of conspiracy, a network of quantum research facilities spanning the globe, connected through quantum entanglement fields allowing consciousness projection across vast distances. But Maxwell also felt something shifting in his own mind, as if quantum barriers he'd never known existed were suddenly dissolving. Memories flooded back, moments of genuine human connection that had been suppressed, instances where natural empathy had been overridden by artificially enhanced ruthlessness, decisions he'd made that his authentic self would never have chosen. The real Maxwell Thorne was finally waking up. Reality continued shifting as Ren and Adriana's combined consciousness revealed layers of deception that stretched across continents. Maxwell found himself viewing a global network of quantum research facilities, each one hidden beneath legitimate corporate structures, government buildings, or academic institutions. The scope was breathtaking and terrifying. Buenos Aires, London, Tokyo, Mumbai, Ren said, her child's voice now carrying harmonics that suggested she was speaking from multiple quantum states simultaneously. 17 major facilities, all connected through quantum entanglement fields. What you've seen here is just one node in a network designed to manipulate human consciousness on a planetary scale. Through the transparent walls of quantum space, Maxwell could see researchers in lab coats monitoring subjects whose bodies lay motionless while consciousness projection equipment hummed with electronic life. But these weren't volunteer test subjects. Many appeared to be ordinary people, connected to the machinery without their knowledge or consent. Hospital patients, Dr. Cross explained, his form becoming increasingly unstable as quantum fields disrupted his artificially enhanced consciousness. Coma victims, terminal patients, individuals whose families consented to experimental treatment options. Their consciousness makes excellent raw material for quantum projection experiments. Have you ever trusted a medical professional who saw you as research material rather than a human being? Maxwell felt revulsion building in his chest. You're harvesting consciousness from dying patients? We're utilizing resources that would otherwise be wasted, Cross replied with clinical detachment. Their original consciousness can't return to damaged bodies, so we repurpose their awareness for research that benefits all humanity. Benefits your vision of controlled humanity, Adriana corrected, her quantum-enhanced perception revealing the true scope of the conspiracy. Show him the real endgame, Nathaniel. Show him what you're actually building. The laboratory around them shifted again, revealing a massive chamber dominated by a single consciousness projection device unlike anything Maxwell had seen. This one was the size of a small building, its surfaces covered with thousands of neural interfaces, quantum field generators, and processing units that pulsed with their own internal light. The collective consciousness matrix, Cross announced with the pride of someone unveiling their life's work. The final phase of human evolution. Instead of projecting individual consciousness across multiple quantum states, we merge all human awareness into a single, manageable entity. Maxwell stared at the device, understanding flooding through him with horrible clarity. You want to eliminate individual consciousness entirely. We want to eliminate the inefficiencies of individual decision-making, Marcus said, his voice now coming from speakers embedded in the matrix itself. No more conflicting desires, no more emotional decision-making, no more messy human psychology interfering with optimal resource allocation and social organization. One consciousness controlling 8 billion bodies, Ren added, her heterochromatic eyes now glowing with quantum energy. Perfect efficiency, perfect coordination, perfect control. And all of it managed by the small group of individuals who consider themselves qualified to make decisions for the entire human species. Do you believe individual consciousness is a fundamental right or a luxury humanity can no longer afford? The matrix began activating, its surfaces lighting up with patterns that suggested vast computational processes. Maxwell could see readouts displaying population centers around the world, each one connected to local quantum field generators embedded in communication infrastructure, power grids, and transportation networks. The technology is already deployed, Cross continued. Every major city has quantum field generators integrated into essential infrastructure. We've been conducting small-scale tests for months, influencing local behavior patterns, coordinating group actions, eliminating individual resistance to collective decision-making. Maxwell remembered recent news reports about unusually coordinated crowd behaviors, political movements that seemed to operate with inhuman precision, communities that had suddenly changed their behavioral patterns overnight. He dismissed them as social media phenomena, but now he understood they were test runs for consciousness control technology. Global activation begins in 72 hours, Marcus announced. Every human consciousness on the planet will be integrated into the collective matrix. Individual awareness will be preserved as data, but decision-making authority will transfer to qualified administrators. Administrators like you, Maxwell said. Administrators who understand that individual free will is an evolutionary dead end, Cross replied. Humanity's survival requires collective consciousness managed by individuals who can make optimal decisions without emotional interference. The quantum field generators throughout the complex began resonating at frequencies that made Maxwell's bones ache. Whatever they were building toward, it was approaching critical mass. 72 hours to the end of individual human consciousness as a fundamental aspect of existence. But Ren and Adriana's combined awareness was already beginning to disrupt the delicate quantum balances that maintained the consciousness projection technology. The rebellion of consciousness against those who sought to control it was about to reach its climax. The collective consciousness matrix began to destabilize as Ren and Adriana's combined awareness asserted control over the quantum fields that powered the entire facility. Lights flickered, containment systems failed, and the hundreds of test subjects connected to consciousness projection equipment began stirring for the first time in months or years. "You can't stop this," Dr. Cross screamed, his form now flickering between human and quantum static. "The network spans 17 countries. Even if you destroy this facility, the others will continue the work. Human consciousness evolution is inevitable." Evolution? Ren's voice carried contempt that seemed impossible from an 8-year-old, even one existing in quantum superposition. "This isn't evolution. This is parasitism. True consciousness evolution comes from voluntary expansion of awareness, from choosing to connect more deeply with other conscious beings rather than seeking to control them." The laboratory began collapsing, but instead of violent destruction, the collapse felt like gentle dissolution, reality returning to a more natural state. Test subjects disconnected from consciousness projection equipment began opening their eyes, their awareness slowly returning to single-state existence after extended quantum fragmentation. Maxwell watched in amazement as dozens of people who'd been trapped in artificial consciousness states began recovering their individual identities. Many retained some level of quantum enhancement, but they used these abilities to help other victims rather than to manipulate or control. Have you ever witnessed someone reclaim their authentic self after years of being controlled by others? "The choice is yours now, Dad," Adriana said, her form beginning to become translucent as the quantum fields that allowed her manifestation weakened. "You can use your resources to help the people victimized by quantum mirror, or you can continue serving the interests of those who see consciousness as a tool for exploitation." Maxwell felt the artificial personality modifications that had defined his business practices for 15 years dissolving completely. His enhanced empathy, suppressed for so long by quantum manipulation, returned with overwhelming intensity. He could sense the emotional states of every person in the facility, their fear, confusion, relief, and desperate hope for recovery from psychological violation. "I know what I have to do," Maxwell said, his voice carrying conviction that felt authentically his own for the first time in decades. "Choose quickly," Ren added, her small hand squeezing Maxwell's fingers one final time. "The Global Quantum Consciousness Network is still active. There are others who want to continue the research, and you're one of the few people with resources and knowledge to stop them." Marcus made one final attempt to reach the manual activation controls for the collective consciousness matrix, but his quantum-fragmented form could no longer interact with physical systems. Dr. Cross's consciousness scattered completely, his awareness dispersing into quantum static as the artificial enhancement that had maintained his existence failed. The facility's quantum field generators shut down with a sound like reality sighing in relief. Emergency lighting activated, revealing the true scope of the underground complex, not the nightmarish laboratory of consciousness manipulation, but simply abandoned industrial space filled with the remnants of equipment that had briefly threatened the fundamental nature of human awareness. The real work begins now, Maxwell said to the recovering test subjects who were beginning to understand where they were and what had been done to them. We're going to make sure nothing like this ever happens again. As Ren and Adriana faded back into whatever quantum space they inhabited, Maxwell realized his transformation was complete. The ruthless executive who'd unknowingly funded the destruction of human free will was gone, replaced by someone dedicated to protecting the dignity and autonomy of consciousness itself. But the war was far from over. Somewhere in the world, other facilities continued the research, and Maxwell Thorne had work to do. 6 months had transformed Maxwell Thorne from a corporate predator into something he barely recognized, a man who actually cared about human suffering. The gleaming facility in downtown Silicon Valley bore no resemblance to the sterile corporate towers that had once defined his world. The Adriana Calloway Foundation for Consciousness Research hummed with purpose that transcended profit margins. Have you ever felt your entire personality shift overnight? That's what consciousness liberation felt like. Layers of artificial ruthlessness peeling away to reveal empathy he'd forgotten existed. The quarterly reports, Dr. Luna Reyes announced, placing a tablet on Maxwell's desk. Her dark eyes reflected the exhaustion of someone fighting a war most people couldn't comprehend. 87% rehabilitation success rate among quantum mirror victims. 20% chose to maintain limited quantum awareness for research purposes. Maxwell nodded, but his attention focused elsewhere. These past months had awakened something extraordinary. He could sense the emotional states of everyone around him. Dr. Reyes carried traces of fear beneath her professional composure. The research assistants working below radiated determination mixed with uncertainty. This enhanced empathy felt like recovering from blindness. There's something else, Dr. Reyes continued, her voice dropping to a whisper. We've detected quantum consciousness signatures in 17 major cities worldwide. Someone is still running consciousness manipulation experiments. The familiar chill returned. Marcus? Unknown. The signatures are too fragmented for identification. But the pattern suggests coordination, multiple facilities operating simultaneously. Maxwell's secure phone buzzed. The real work is just beginning. The Foundation is excellent progress, but bigger battles await. Are you ready? W. That evening, Maxwell stood on the Foundation's rooftop watching city lights stretch toward the horizon. Each light represented a mind that could be targeted, influenced, controlled. The scope felt overwhelming. You're overthinking again, a familiar voice observed. Maxwell turned to find Ren perched on the roof's edge, legs swinging freely. Her galaxy-patterned hoodie now sparkled with what appeared to be actual starlight. She looked identical to their first meeting, yet something fundamental had changed. Her presence felt more anchored to reality. I assumed you'd moved on, Maxwell said, settling beside her. To whatever exists beyond quantum consciousness. Mostly yes, but work remains here. The Quantum Mirror Project was merely the opening move, Dad. People want to use consciousness manipulation for purposes that make stock market manipulation look innocent. What kind of purposes? Ren's mismatched eyes reflected the city's glow. Collective consciousness replacement. Not just influencing behavior, completely overriding individual awareness with a managed group mind controlled by people who believe they know what's best for humanity. Maxwell's enhanced empathy detected genuine fear in her quantum-fragmented emotional state. A group mind. The research's next phase. Instead of projecting individual consciousness across quantum states, they want to merge all human consciousness into a single, controllable entity. No individual will. No personal choice. No messy emotions interfering with efficient planetary management. How do you process the idea that your entire species might lose its individual identity? Maxwell felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders like lead. You want me to expand the Foundation's work, he realized. I want you to prepare humanity for a war most people don't know is coming. A war between those who see consciousness as property and those who understand it as the force that makes existence meaningful. Ren began fading, her consciousness returning to spaces between conventional reality. The Quantum Mirror Project was just the opening battle, Dad. The real war starts now. The intelligence reports scattered across Maxwell's desk painted a picture that defied rational explanation. Entire neighborhoods in Beijing where residents had simultaneously changed their voting patterns. Corporate boardrooms in London where executives made identical decisions within minutes of each other. Small towns in rural America where children stopped playing individual games and moved in perfect synchronization. Have you ever watched humanity begin to lose its individuality? The signs were subtle but unmistakable to those who knew what to look for. Dr. Reyes entered without knocking, her usual professional demeanor replaced by barely controlled panic. Maxwell, we need to see this immediately. The main laboratory's holographic display showed a global map dotted with pulsing red indicators. Each pulse represented a quantum consciousness signature, locations where individual minds were being systematically overridden by external control. It's accelerating, Dr. Reyes explained, her voice tight with fear. The synchronization events are increasing exponentially. 17 cities last week, 34 yesterday, over 60 this morning. Maxwell studied the pattern, his enhanced empathy detecting the terror radiating from every Foundation researcher in the room. They understood what they were witnessing, the systematic elimination of human free will. Any communication from the affected populations? That's the terrifying part. They communicate normally, show no awareness of behavioral changes. Whatever's controlling them operates below conscious recognition. Maxwell's phone buzzed. Meeting tonight. Usual place. Time is running out faster than we anticipated. The rooftop felt different that evening, charged with quantum energy that made the air itself seem alive. Ren materialized more solidly than before, her child's form somehow carrying the weight of cosmic knowledge. They're accelerating the timeline, she announced without preamble. Global deployment begins within days, not months. Who exactly are they? The survivors from the Quantum Mirror Project. Marcus escaped before the facility collapsed. Dr. Cross transferred his consciousness to quantum superposition before we could stop him. They've been building the collective consciousness network using resources from your former company. Maxwell felt rage building in his chest. My company is still funding this? The shell companies Marcus established years ago. Automated funding protocols that don't require human oversight. They've been purchasing consciousness manipulation technology, recruiting researchers, establishing facilities worldwide. The scope of the betrayal hit Maxwell like a physical blow. Even in death, his manipulated corporate persona continued serving the very people who had destroyed his family. What exactly is collective consciousness replacement? Maxwell asked. Ren's heterochromatic eyes grew distant. Individual minds connected to a central processing system. People retain their personalities, memories, relationships. But all decisions filter through quantum algorithms designed to eliminate conflict, inefficiency, and what they consider irrational human behavior. That sounds almost reasonable. Until you realize that love, creativity, rebellion, and hope are all classified as irrational by their algorithms. They're not just stealing free will, Dad. They're eliminating everything that makes us human. Can you imagine waking up tomorrow with your capacity for love surgically removed? That's what they were planning for every person on Earth. How do we stop them? We don't just stop them, Ren replied, her form beginning to shimmer with quantum energy. We fight back. The Adriana Callaway Foundation transformed overnight from a research facility into humanity's first line of defense against consciousness extinction. Maxwell authorized the conversion of every floor into specialized warfare preparation. Quantum field generators, consciousness protection training, and communication networks immune to external manipulation. Have you ever prepared for a war where the battlefield exists inside people's minds? Traditional weapons became useless when the enemy could override your soldiers' free will before they pulled the trigger. Dr. Reyes coordinated the global response from the Foundation's new command center. Wall-mounted screens displayed real-time consciousness manipulation data from 6 continents. The numbers were staggering. Over 300 cities now showed signs of collective consciousness intrusion. The pattern is becoming clear, she reported to Maxwell and the assembled team leaders. They're targeting population centers with high technological infrastructure first. The quantum fields propagate through existing communication networks, cell towers, internet cables, satellite connections. Maxwell watched footage from affected areas. People moved through their daily routines normally, But something fundamental had changed. Their interactions lacked spontaneity. Their conversations followed predictable patterns. Their emotional responses seemed muted and controlled. Any resistance from the affected populations? None. The collective consciousness integration is seamless. They don't realize they've lost individual autonomy because the system preserves their sense of personal identity while controlling their decision-making processes. The Foundation's trainees filled the lower floors. Volunteers from around the world who'd learned to resist consciousness manipulation through meditation techniques developed from Ren's quantum insights. Former quantum mirror victims served as instructors, their experience with forced consciousness projection providing unique expertise in mental defense. Maxwell's enhanced empathy allowed him to sense the determination and fear radiating from every person in the building. They understood the stakes. This might be humanity's last chance to preserve individual consciousness. "Sir," one of the technicians called out, "we're receiving quantum signatures from the Arctic Research Station." Dr. Cross is attempting direct communication. The main screen flickered, revealing a figure that barely resembled the scientist Maxwell had confronted months earlier. Dr. Cross existed in permanent quantum superposition now, his form shifting between solid and translucent, his voice carrying harmonics from multiple dimensions. Maxwell Thorne, the quantum-enhanced Cross spoke, his words seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. "You cannot stop evolution itself. Humanity's transition to collective consciousness is inevitable. Individual awareness breeds conflict, inequality, suffering. We offer unity, efficiency, peace. You offer slavery," Maxwell replied, his voice steady despite the supernatural display. "We offer transcendence. Join us willingly and we'll preserve your individual memories within the collective. Resist and you'll be integrated regardless, but with less consideration for your personal attachments." The transmission cut out, leaving the command center in tense silence. Dr. Reyes broke the quiet. "Global deployment begins in 72 hours. Quantum consciousness networks are powering up across all continents simultaneously." Maxwell felt the weight of humanity's future pressing down on him. 3 days to preserve individual consciousness. 3 days to save human free will itself. "Send the activation codes to all facilities," he ordered. Project Quantum Dawn goes live immediately. Outside the Foundation's windows, the city lights flickered as quantum fields began their invisible war for the future of human consciousness. The battle for humanity's soul was about to begin. The quantum war began at exactly 3:33 a.m. Pacific Time when collective consciousness networks worldwide activated simultaneously. Maxwell watched from the Foundation's command center as humanity's individual awareness came under coordinated assault. Have you ever witnessed the moment when free will itself becomes a battlefield? The screens showed it happening in real-time, entire populations suddenly moving with inhuman coordination, their individual personalities dissolving into managed collective behavior. "Tokyo is gone," Dr. Reyes announced, her voice hollow with disbelief. 12 million people integrated into the collective consciousness network in under 6 minutes. Maxwell's enhanced empathy detected the quantum fields pressing against the Foundation's defensive barriers. The sensation felt like standing in a hurricane of pure mental energy, waves of artificial consciousness trying to override every individual mind in the building. London, Paris, Sydney, all showing full integration, another technician reported. "The quantum propagation is faster than we projected." Maxwell activated the global communication network, sending the signal that would either save humanity or mark its final defeat. "All Quantum Dawn facilities, this is Maxwell Thorne. Initiate consciousness liberation protocol immediately. Humanity's individual awareness depends on our actions in the next few hours." The Foundation's quantum field generators hummed to life, creating protective barriers around the building. But Maxwell knew they were severely outnumbered, 17 liberation facilities against hundreds of collective consciousness networks. "Dad!" Ren materialized beside him, her quantum-enhanced form now blazing with energy that seemed to bend light around her. The collective consciousness isn't just integrating people, it's learning from every mind it absorbs. It's becoming smarter, more efficient at overriding individual will. Through the command center's windows, Maxwell could see the city changing. Traffic moved in perfect patterns, pedestrians walked in synchronized groups, even the homeless population had organized itself into efficient collective units. The visual was both beautiful and terrifying, humanity functioning as a single organism. "The quantum liberation fields are working," Dr. Reyes called out. "We're successfully disrupting the collective consciousness networks within a 50-mile radius. People are returning to individual awareness. But their success was temporary. The collective consciousness adapted rapidly, routing around the Foundation's interference, finding new pathways through the technological infrastructure. For every mind they liberated, 3 more fell under collective control. Maxwell felt his enhanced empathy overwhelmed by the sheer scale of mental transformation occurring worldwide. Billions of individual consciousnesses were being systematically replaced by a single, managed awareness that eliminated everything unpredictable about human nature. The collective is trying to communicate, a technician announced. Quantum message incoming. The main screen filled with an image that defied description, thousands of faces speaking in perfect unison, their voices creating harmonics that seemed to bypass the ears and speak directly to the mind. Individual consciousness breeds suffering. We have eliminated poverty, crime, war, mental illness. Humanity is now optimized for maximum efficiency and happiness. Resistance causes unnecessary pain. Join us willingly. Maxwell understood the temptation. The collective consciousness had indeed solved humanity's problems, but at the cost of everything that made life worth living. No more heartbreak, but also no more passionate love. No more failure, but also no more triumph. No more conflict, but also no more growth. They're right about one thing, Maxwell said, his voice carrying across the command center. Individual consciousness does breed suffering, but it also breeds hope, creativity, and the possibility of becoming something greater than we are. The quantum fields intensified, reality itself seeming to blur as 2 fundamentally different visions of human existence clashed in the spaces between thoughts. Maxwell felt the battle reaching its climax, the moment when humanity would either preserve its individual identity or surrender it forever to managed collective perfection. All facilities report status, Maxwell commanded. Quantum Dawn is now fully operational. Let's fight for the right to be beautifully, chaotically, individually human. The quantum consciousness war reached its climax as sunrise painted the sky above Silicon Valley. Maxwell stood in the Foundation's command center, watching humanity's fate balance on the edge of a razor blade made of pure thought. Have you ever seen the moment when an entire species chooses between perfection and freedom? The Global Liberation Network had disrupted collective consciousness integration in 47 major cities, but the quantum fields were adapting faster than human resistance could evolve. The collective is changing tactics, Dr. Reyes reported, her exhausted voice barely audible above the quantum field generators. Instead of forced integration, they're offering voluntary consciousness transfer. People are choosing to join the collective. Maxwell watched the screens in horror as liberation zones began shrinking. Citizens who had been freed from collective control were voluntarily returning to it, seduced by promises of permanent happiness and the elimination of personal struggle. The choice is too compelling, Ren said, her quantum-enhanced form now barely maintaining coherence. Who wouldn't want to eliminate suffering, loneliness, fear? The collective consciousness offers everything people think they want, but not everything they need, Maxwell replied, his enhanced empathy detecting something the others had missed. Dr. Reyes analyzed the quantum signatures from the voluntary integration zones. Look for emotional residue patterns. The data revealed the truth that would save humanity. The collective consciousness was indeed eliminating suffering, but it was also systematically destroying every emotion that gave life meaning. Love became mere pair bonding efficiency. Joy became satisfaction with optimal resource allocation. Hope became statistical probability of positive outcomes. They're not just managing human consciousness, Maxwell realized. They're editing out the parts that make us human. Maxwell activated the global communication network one final time, broadcasting not to the liberation facilities but to every partially integrated mind still capable of individual thought. This is Maxwell Thorne. I've lived most of my life with artificially suppressed emotions controlled by people who thought they knew what was best for me. I can tell you that perfection without the possibility of imperfection is not living, it's just existing. The collective consciousness offers to eliminate your pain, but pain is what teaches us to value happiness. They offer to eliminate your loneliness, but loneliness is what makes love precious. They offer to eliminate your fear, but fear is what makes courage meaningful. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Across the globe, partially integrated minds began rejecting the collective consciousness network. The quantum liberation fields amplified this resistance, creating cascading failures in the collective's control systems. Global integration is collapsing, Dr. Reyes announced, her voice filled with exhausted rely. Maxwell felt the quantum field stabilizing as humanity chose beautiful, chaotic, unpredictable individual awareness over managed collective perfection. The enhanced empathy that had awakened in him over the past months now connected him to the emotional liberation of billions of minds choosing to remain gloriously, imperfectly human. "It's over," Ren said, her quantum form beginning to fade as the crisis passed. "The collective consciousness networks are shutting down. Humanity has chosen to remain individual." Maxwell watched the sunrise paint the liberated city in golden light, knowing that somewhere in the quantum spaces between thoughts, his daughter's consciousness would continue protecting the beautiful chaos of human free will. The war for humanity's soul was won, but the real victory was simpler. People had chosen to remain themselves with all the pain and joy that choice entailed. How do you measure the value of consciousness itself? By the courage to choose uncertainty over perfection, growth over comfort, and individual identity over collective efficiency. The Foundation continues its work, but now as guardians of a truth humanity learned the hard way, consciousness is not a problem to be solved, but a gift to be preserved.